A country reaching for independence. An African country wanting to stand on its own feet, free from British rule. From Nairobi, the capital, Reginald Bosanquet reports.
The statue of the third Lord Delamere, which stands in the centre of Nairobi, may well be gone within a year. It's exactly the sort of symbol of colonialism that an independent Kenya will want to remove. Lord Delamere, who was one of Kenya's most famous white settlers, said in 1903 that he was going to prove that this was a white man's country. It's taken almost 60 years to prove him wrong. And in fact, it wasn't until the Lancaster House Conference of 1960 that Kenya was really accepted as a black man's country. The image of the old Kenya was a white settler. The new Kenyan is an African.
Well, who are the new Kenyans? The Africans who will make the country's future. One of the new leaders is District Commissioner John Michuki. Michuki, he's 31, went into government service after getting his school certificate and spending a year at Oxford on the Overseas Services course. 8 years later, he got to the top. He became a District Commissioner last December. Kenya was the first East African country to have African District Commissioners. The area Michuki is in charge of lies in the Nyeri district of the new Central region, one of the 7 regions the new Kenya is now being carved into. In 2 days' time, voting begins to elect regional governments, as well as a national Senate and a House of Representatives under Kenya's new constitution. Most of Michuki's time is being spent explaining to African voters in his area their rights and responsibilities in the elections, the first that all Africans over 21 can take part in. The explanations are most easily put across at barazas, mass meetings. But first, there's a police parade to inspect. After the inspection, a presentation, the award of a long service medal to a sergeant major. Men like Michuki, Kenya's new leaders, whether in government, industry or agriculture, are a small select number, for the educated Kenyan is an exception rather than the rule. The population of 8 million is largely illiterate. The police band may give a touch of gaiety, but for the most part, barazas are business-like affairs, meetings where Africans can air their grievances and get an on-the-spot reply. Michuki has to be as well briefed as a minister facing backbenchers at question time in the House of Commons. After explaining the ins and outs of voting, Michuki was asked by one man why there wasn't government-subsidized water in his area. The answer to that one was one common to all governments: not enough money. After the meeting, Reginald Bosanquet spoke to Commissioner Michuki.
Are a number of Africans taking over now as district commissioners from Europeans?
Yes, there are. As far as I can remember, in fact, I had 8 colleagues with me who became district commissioners at the same time with me. And of course, there before, we had other African district commissioners. In fact, the district commissioner from whom I took over was an African, and he really did introduce me to the district.
Do you find that as an African you are accepted and respected by the Africans you deal with in the same way that a European district commissioner has been in the past?
There is no doubt about that. I think people are coming to realize the fact that it isn't the individual that really matters. It is the principle he upholds, the principle that he tries to impart into the people.
Do you have any tribal problems as a Kikuyu when you have to deal with people from other tribes?
Far from it. I feel even happier when dealing with other people. I have worked in another province, Nyanza province, which is predominantly the Baluhia and the Luo, who, of course, I had apprehensions first when I got there, but I've got quite a number of friends there. And I would be quite happy to work in the area because I know I was accepted as a leader by the people in it. that province.
From a leader in the country to a leader in the city, Michuki, resale manager for Shell and BP, which in Kenya is a combined company. Michuki, he's 32, has been with the company 8 years. He joined them as a trainee executive after taking an arts degree. The work has given him a wide experience of East Africa, as a depot under-manager in Uganda, building up a chain of service stations in Tanganyika, then over to Kenya to open up new markets. At present, 1 in 6 of Shell BP's executives are Africans. 10 years from now, the company expects it to be 3 in 4. This will do something to offset the pressure after independence for foreign companies to put more Africans in top jobs. But here again, the problem is lack of educated Africans. Reginald Bosanquet discussed this with Mr. Michuki.
Are there many African executives like you in Kenya?
I won't say there are many, although in the past few years, a number of the larger commercial firms have employed Africans in the executive grades in their organizations. I can mention a few, East African Tobacco, for instance, another oil company, the ESO Standard. It is definitely a pattern that is evolving in the country.
When you began, though, in 1955, were you fairly exceptional?
Well, to be quite honest, I think I was fairly exceptional. It so happens that, in fact, there were 2 of us who had just graduated at Makerere, and we decided to join commerce. And it was so exceptional that it was a news item at that time. It appeared in the newspaper that 2 Makerere graduates have decided to join commerce.
Do you think, Mr. Michuki, you might be tempted to leave your present job and join the government?
Well, as far as I'm concerned, I think the temptation will be there, but it's a question of whether the person concerned answers to the temptation. I have got an interesting job in my company, and it is no secret to say that I have already been approached by some people from the government. But as far as I can see, I'm quite satisfied in my present job and in the prospects in the job, that I think I shall resist as much as possible, the temptation.
Do you think that an independent government in Kenya will put pressure on firms like yours to increase the number of African executives?
I think it is bound to come, really. New countries are always keen to see the ratio disproportion corrected, both in government and in commerce. But I think for some time to come, the most immediate problem will be really to man the government services.
Mr. Michuki, you have Is it difficult for a girl like yourself to break away from your traditional way of life and lead a more sophisticated life in Nairobi?
No, it isn't. If you try, but if you don't, it can be very hard because people would be very nasty to you.
Who would be nasty to you?
Mostly men from your location or village.
Is this because they still think a woman should be not equal?
Yes, it is, partly. And partly because they think a woman should get married and get settled and live in the village.
Is this because the African men resent you becoming westernized?
Yes, I think we are a bit jealous.
Are they also jealous of your education?
Yes, but not the ones who are educated. The ones who are not educated, I mean the average educated man, isn't all that jealous, but the ones who have never had any education hates it, just hates it.
If the African man is reluctant to accept you, how do the Europeans, white people, react to you?
That's a hard question to answer, but I think the white man may accept me more fully than the African.
And what about white women?
They don't accept me, no.
Why not?
They just resent.
Why not?
One thing, I think women who have been brought up here in Kenya, they suffer from some
racial prejudice? Or?
Yes, I think racial prejudice.
In what way do they show it?
It's when you go to places like big hotels, like New Stanley Hotel, and you sit down out there, perhaps you want a cold drink or a cup of coffee or tea, and they all turn their heads and look at you, staring at you as if they have never seen a black person before.
Do you mind this?
No, not really. I feel sad for them because we look upon white man as a superior man, and we always think she or he should be more cultured.
You do look upon white men as superior, do you?
Oh, yes, we do. But when they behave like this, it choked one. You feel it's awful, it's bad manners.
But I thought the whole sort of idea of African nationalism was the African was saying he was as good as the white man.
Yes, we say that. We can't help saying that because, we want to have that confidence in us.
But you don't believe it?
I do believe it in some ways, but since they are the people who brought civilization here, we tend to look at them in a superior way, think they are a bit superior. Let's say in manners.
The people you've just seen are typical of the Africans who will run the new Kenya, but they're not typical of Africans in Kenya in the sense that there's an acute shortage of trained and educated Africans here. After 60 years of British rule, there are 8 million or more Africans in Kenya and 24 African secondary schools. So, although the new Kenyan will be a black man, he will not be, in the majority of cases, a trained or qualified man. And this is going to be one of Kenya's biggest problems when she becomes independent. Good night.